Hi, I'm reporter Abhinav Eiler for ABC 7 News, and today on our show, Cultures of Ancient Civilizations, we will be talking about Heian Japan and Shogun Japan. And without further ado, I present Professors Narvikar, Lee, and Donalak. So, professors, what can you tell us about the daily society of the Heian period and the Shogun period?
Thanks, Abhinav. Japan was a unique country filled with diverse cultures.
Japan is made of 5 main islands: Honshu, Hokkaido, Kyushu, Okinawa, and Shikoku. The land was very mountainous, which made growing crops very difficult, and only 15% of the land could be farmed. That's why rice, the main food source, was so valuable. Japan was surrounded by water on all sides and was near Russia, China, and Korea. This is why it interacted with these cultures.
The Golden Age of Japan, also known as the Age of Heian, was from approximately 800 to 1200 CE. There were 9 rankings in the social pyramid: 3 high nobles, 3 lower nobles, and 3 lower class rankings. The top 3 high nobles carried fans of 25 folds, the lower nobles carried fans of 23 folds, and the peasants and merchants carried fans of 12 folds. There were also a group of people similar to a class called non-persons, which included slaves and servants.
These precise rankings shaped the lives of nobility. To the Japanese, being born in a high-ranking family mattered more than personal skill. The influence of social class was evident in every aspect of life. The high nobility of this time enjoyed luxurious lifestyles. These nobles consisted of relatives of the emperor or descendants of the Fujiwara or Yamato clans. Their prosperity was partially due to the taxes and profits they received from the peasants. Additionally, the emperor granted large estates to these nobles, funding their wealth.
The Japanese had many cultural values such as beauty and good manners. Women and men blackened their teeth and often wore perfume. Women also left their hair long and wore makeup. She would chalk her face with white powder, paint her mouth bright red, and paint high eyebrows on the top of her forehead.
Peasant life and wealthy noble life was entirely different from each other. Peasant life and wealthy noble life was entirely different from each other. The wealthy aristocrats had much more power and pleasures than the peasants, who labored in their farms to feed the country. The aristocrats didn't care much for the peasants' needs, which is one factor that led to Heian Japan's downfall.
Greetings, I'm Professor Danlak from Oxford University. During the 800 CE to the 1100 CE, writing, poetry, and literature was very important during this period of wealth. The 800 CEs to the 1100 CE, writing, poetry, and culture was very important. Many people were expected to be able to write, especially poetry. A person's handwriting somewhat represented a person's goodness and character. Good manners were very important as well. Sometimes your ranking could depend on your manners and how you behave. There are 2 types of writing in Japan, known as katakana and hiragana. Katakana was mostly for men and it was more formal. Hiragana was mostly for women and it was more for personal writing. Many people also wrote poems or letters to each other to delight them, and they were expected to write back in the same format if they received one. Women were selected to courtiers depending on their intelligence. Also, women helped lead the golden age of Japanese literature in the 10th and 11th centuries.
Now we will listen to an excerpt from Radio Show Warrior History, presented by the accomplished Professor Alex Cho.
Good day, I'm Professor Alexander of Japanese History Academy. Here are basic and concise facts about the weapons and armor of the fierce warrior samurai. During the Heian period, there was not much use for samurai as Japan was completely united. The only people allowed to wield weapons was the imperial military. During the feudal period, the government was controlled by the Shogun, the commander-in-chief of the Japanese military. The Shogun was assisted by the daimyos, warrior lords who employed the samurai. They were trained to perform martial arts and be confident with a bow and arrow and spear. The samurai's most prized weapon was a sword itself. He could not go to battle without it, and sometimes wore thigh guards as well for protection. Samurai are expected to be ready at all times and was also expected to be confident with the bow and arrow.
As you can see here, the professors are very accomplished in their knowledge of Japan. I myself am a historian as a hobby, as those of you watching the show know. The government of Japan was very similar to China's government because they adapted many customs. Japan ruled with government officials and ujis, which resulted in the emperor's loss of power. The Taika reform was issued by Emperor Kotoku in 645, and it increased the emperor's power by taking land away from the ujis. Rice was the most common medium of exchange because it was so valuable as Japan's main food source. When Minamoto Yoritomo took over Japan, the government changed to a feudal system, with the shogun being the commander-in-chief, ruling over the local lord daimyos, who had samurai knights to support them. Then came the farmers, craftsmen, merchants, and finally peasants.
The fundamental difference between feudal Japan and Heian Kyo was the government. In the Heian period, the emperor had power and was aided by the imperial court. In feudal Japan, military leaders held power. The shogun, which was the commander-in-chief of the samurais, basically had more power than the emperor himself.
Here's another excerpt from Professor Cho.
Police officers and non-samurai citizens used a jute, an iron dagger. They also used a daisho, which is the primary weapon in close combats. The secondary weapon was the wakizashi, which is a shorter version of the daisho and is also used in committing suicide. The Japanese helmet was called the kabuto, and the Japanese armor was called the kiku.
Now I'll talk about writing, literature, and culture during the 1100 CE and 1600 CE. During the Shogun period, there were two types of Buddhism known as Amida Buddhism and Zen Buddhism. A monk named Heian founded a popular form of Amida Buddhism. These Buddhists believed people could reach paradise. Heian taught believers that they can reach paradise by relying on the mercy of Amida Buddha. Amida was an Indian prince who was believed to have created the Pure Land. You could reach this Pure Land by relying on the Buddha for mercy and help. When a believer died, Buddhists would be waiting to escort the believer to the Pure Land. Zen Buddhism stressed on self-reliance and reaching enlightenment by meditation, and it mostly related to a samurai. Zen Buddhism emphasizes on effort and discipline. To reach enlightenment, Zen Buddhists meditated for hours. During the time, a new type of writing form called haiku, which even samurai used. A haiku poet uses images to suggest an idea or create a mood.
Japan's ancient traditions still affect modern-day life in Japan today. Proper manners such as bowing to others or taking your shoes off before entering a room are still used. Sumo wrestling is still a popular sport in modern-day Japan. Also, writing, poems, and other literature are still used, such as haiku. Tea ceremonies are still very common in Japan.
Well, thanks for being here, professors.
You're welcome.